Good morning, afternoon, or evening. On this occasion, I will review a very visceral and unflinching novella, The Hellbound Heart, by English writer Clive Barker, originally published on November 24, 1986. The version I had read is a purple softcover book printed by Hermida Editores, with a comfortable and high-quality interior design, off-white pages, and an extremely legible font ideal for reading. Clive Barker's prose in The Hellbound Heart functions as a deliberate paradox. He marries the high-flown, almost operatic language of 19th century romanticism with the gritty, industrialized decay of the 20th century urban landscape. Technically, Barker is obsessed with the physical threshold. In his narrative, the skin is not a protector, but a limit that must be breached. In traditional horror, the body is a fortress that is violated. In Barker's world, the body is a prison that yearns to be violated. The transformation of Frank Cotton from a man into a state of semi-liquid, skeletal existence is described with a clinical precision that mirrors scientific observation. Barker forces the reader to engage with texture, the wetness of the resurrection chamber, the cold, polished surfaces of the lament configuration, and the oily sensation of the Cenobite chains. By focusing on sensory input, he bypasses the reader's intellectual defenses and triggers a visceral, psychological response, distinguishing Barker from other horror writers because of its unusual infusion of the alchemy on the anatomical. It makes the reader think on physical transformation, senses, smell, noise, touch, sight, blood, flesh, muscle, nerves, bone, the corporeal materials that defines us, and our awareness of them, taken to the extreme of pain, nausea, sorrow, pleasure, fatigue, fear, and many other states. The Hellbound Heart is, at its core, a subversion of the Faustian legend, but with a crucial Barkerian twist. In the traditional Faustian bargain, there is usually a moral lesson or an opportunity for the protagonist to realize the error of its ways. Barker systematically dismantles the before-mentioned. The Cenobites are neither demons or Judeo-Christian entities, nor are they strictly evil. They have knowledge of agony. Their dialogue is surprisingly polite, detached, and devoid of malice. This lack of malice is what makes them terrifying. They are simply performing a function within a cosmic system that the human mind cannot comprehend, and tend to associate with evil. A significant portion of the book's aberrant nature was inspired by Barker's own life experiences during the 1970s, a time in which he worked as a male sex worker. Barker wanted to explore the connective tissue between good and evil, especially through the lens of human sexuality. He was specifically influenced by his exposure to underground S&M clubs, such as Cell Block 22 in New York. Seeing people engaging in extreme body modification, such as piercings as a form of pleasure, helped spark his fascination with the blurred lines between agony and ecstasy. This led him to create the Cenobites, who serve as theologians of a philosophy that views pain and pleasure not as opposites, but as a spectrum of intense sensation. Barker deliberately sought to avoid the common tropes of supernatural fiction In many horror stories of that era, accessing hell or another dimension was often depicted by drawing magical circles or symbols on the floor, which Barker found cliché. Instead, he turned to a childhood memory for inspiration regarding the key to the underworld. Barker's grandfather was a ship's cook who traveled to the Far East and brought back a puzzle box. Barker became obsessed with this object as a child, and he chose to use a similar puzzle box, the Lumection configuration, as the mechanism for summoning the Cenobites, grounding the supernatural in a tactile, physical object. Frank Cotton is not a tragic character, he is a pathetic one. His obsession is purely selfish, fueled by a bored, jaded psyche. Barker paints the search for the ultimate sensation not as a noble quest for knowledge, but as a symptom of a deep, unfillable existential vacuum. The setting of the story, the house in London, is as much a character as any of the human protagonists. The house was a body, and the room where Frank was reconstituted was its dark, pulsating heart. Barker treats the physical space of the novella as a reflection of the character's internal states. Just as Frank attempts to inhabit other bodies, the house is inhabited by the residual energy of his failed resurrection. The architecture is full of windows, doors, and hallways that represent transitions. When the puzzle box is solved, the physical walls of the house seem to dissolve, suggesting that the hell the Cenobites represent is not a geographic location, but a frequency of reality that exists just beneath the surface of our own. By stripping away the monstrous tropes of the 1980s, Barker elevated the horror genre into the realm of physical inquiry, that pleasure and pain are inseparable. The Hellbound heart serves as a foundational text for what will eventually be termed body horror in literature. If you stare into the void, Barker argues, the void doesn't just stare back, it invites you to become part of the scenery. The novella remains a gruesome marvel of concision. In under 100 pages, Barker creates a universe, establishes an intricate metaphysical system, explores complex characters' dynamics, and delivers a reflection on human desire.